Okay, today what I want to work on is getting the second cliffs in, and the, let me see there, getting all of this extraneous stuff here underpainted and based in, and we have to get all of that in before we can start any detail. Alright, this is my number 4 flat bristle brush, and I'm going to start with that, see if that is what I want, because I'm in the overall scheme of things, I am kind of working in a small area. Again, I'm going to underpaint, and I'm picking up my burnt sienna, a little blue, and a slight touch of orange, because those hills are pretty orange. I still have the gray that I mixed from last week. Let me test this. I think I want a little bit more blue in it. The colors that I'm putting on now, those become the, this becomes the shadows and the kind of secondary colors. And with this, I'm going to pull down. I'm just kind of going up and just pulling down and kind of pulling in the direction of the cliffs, because that gives, I don't know, you can see the brush marks that I've got going in there. Those brush marks also become part of the texture. I'm not going to worry about houses or trees or anything else on the top up here. I'm just worried about the cliff. Now I drew this in with soft vine charcoal, and I'll do some more of that here in a minute when I get this kind of based in. Now I can pick up like a little bit of burnt sienna, a little bit of orange, and just kind of work that into my cliffs if I want to. This is wet into wet. I'm going to remix with the burnt sienna and blue, a little touch of orange. You'll probably find that the orange is a lot stronger than the other two. And I'm also going to add a little touch of that gray. Now that gray was a mix of blue, burnt sienna, and white. But I'm adding that because this cliff here, actually there's a little cliff here. A little more of that gray. The gray kind of helps push it back, so it's not quite as strong. So I get some kind of a graded color, picking up just a little bit more blue and burnt sienna. This is kind of a bowl right here, and so as this comes closer, it's going to get a little bit more colorful. And I'm just doing that in my underpainting. I'll do some more of that. There's also, now, one of the things, and this came up over the weekend as I got a question, is that the paint gets very sticky. The consistency you want in your paints is kind of the consistency of soft butter. You want it soft enough that you can get it on, but you don't want it so thin that it doesn't cover. Okay, this is, I just added a little bit of gesso and a little more orange. There's a path or something that goes right in there. Now I'm going to take and I'm just going to soften the bottom of that with my finger. But controlling the water in your acrylics is kind of it's an important thing, but it's also a little bit of a tricky thing, because you can get too much water real fast. So if you're really, really careful, you can dip into your water bucket, but just barely touch the surface. And that is enough to change the consistency of a lot of paint. If you have a wet brush or something, you know, you can, where am I? Okay, you can like just touch that and pick up water. It kind of, the top of it kind of angles, but at the bottom what we have to do is create the bottom with a series of what are called ellipses, so that it looks like it's flat in the water. If I were just to draw a straight line like that, it would look like it was standing out of the water. And you know, if you do make them a mark that you don't like, just take wet paper towel, or I've got a wet t-shirt here, looks better there. But you want to keep the bottoms of that are against the water looking flat. The top can be a little rugged because that's the top of where the rocks are. But you want to keep this part here flat. So basically I'm still going to use this number 4 flat bristle, and I'm going to add to my color the more blue, a little more brown, and some more of that gray. That soft gray just kind of modifies what I'm doing. And checking. Just come in and this is called scumbling, where you just kind of, you know, top I'll do a little closer. Just add a little more water to that. But just kind of like pat it and go every direction. That starts some of the process of creating some texture. Added a little more blue to that. You know, when I'm doing something like this, I will go in and just pick up color. You know, I'll start with like this base color, and then I will add into it, you know, some of the either more of the same color, or maybe I'll pick up some of the other colors. I just picked up some more blue and burnt sienna, and just my brush is just kind of dancing around here. Pick up some of that gray. Now I'm down at the bottom. I'm going to be kind of a little more careful so that I keep my my rocks looking like they're in the water and not standing up. But at the top, I'll just come in and just kind of tap it and create an interesting shape. More blue, more burnt sienna, a little touch of that gray. Actually, I think I want more gray. And you can also, like, I've also got some burnt umber. If you have burnt umber, the burnt umber will give you a little bit darker color. So just blue, burnt umber, burnt sienna. And I'm the way I'm using my brush is I'm kind of, it's moving around in my hand. I'm not keeping it in one particular place. It's not, I am holding it back. It just feels odd to be teaching and being able to stand kind of in front of my work. Out here, in closer to the land, the strokes can be a little bit bigger. Okay, now the final thing I want to get going is the sand. So I'm going to pick up some more burnt sienna, some of that gray. I think I'm going to add a little bit of the orange to it. Let's see if I like that color. Yeah, that's okay. Now the sand is going downhill. It's going down into the ocean. So again, my strokes are going to reflect what I'm doing. Where it may be a little flatter up here, it then starts going down. So it can be my strokes can be a little flatter up here. Again, I'm going to just pick up some burnt sienna and a little orange. And then as they go into the water, they're going to go down. And I'm looking at my reference photo to kind of see what's going on there. And kind of clean that off. Now as it goes into the water, I'm lightening the pressure on my brush so that it kind of just fades into the water. This is called dry brush blending because acrylics do dry quicker, and that is a blessing and a curse. If you're used to oils, you're used to being able to blend for days into the color, whereas with acrylics 20 minutes and it's gone. Let's see if I can move that up on the ledge. Okay, but I'm using the side of my brush and very lightly skimming over, and at a slightly downward going to add a little bit of burnt sienna to that color, a little more blue because this is wetter water. Load my brush up, and it's a dry brush, so I may take some of that off. But so you don't need a lot of paint on your brush to do this. And this dirt color kind of goes out here quite a bit. We're going to do some more work on the water, but this will be kind of part of our underpainting. Okay, a little bit more here. Double checking my reference. Now I can always do more. You know, and I probably will, but for right now I'm good with that. All right, so like I was saying, if you've got a wet brush, you can pick up water off of a wet brush, or keep the brush, you know, a brush wet, and that's just to pick up a little bit of water to mix into your paint. Now this is my rock color, and I was using my burnt sienna, my blue, and then this was the gray that I mixed last week. Now as long as you keep your paints moist, this palette that I have is a stay wet system. I don't use the sponge that comes with it because that rots in about a week. But I have this is a cheap cutting mat that I got at the dollar store, and then around here I have paper towels. And that just keeps my paints moist. They will stay moist for weeks as long as I'm just mixing a little bit more. So that was my blue, my burnt sienna. I threw in a little bit of burnt umber for good measure. And they don't need to be perfectly mixed. You know, if you have a little bit of variation. And another thing that I do is that I will work out off of a corner of something. So say I need a lighter version of this, I can take that gray and mix into that lighter, oops, there we go, mix into that lighter, mix it with the lighter color, and have that, and then maybe I want to have a darker version of this. I will pick up some blue and maybe some burnt umber and mix into another corner. I understand. And so I have like three values. I've got a dark, a medium, and a light. So, you know, when I'm mixing, I'm kind of doing that. I'm a little more impatient, so I don't always mix it as well as I've mixed it here, but that's okay because rocks and things, they aren't a solid color. They're a mix of many colors. I might even, you know, throw in some green at some point into this, you know, because there are some trees and stuff there. So I have this nice muted green from there. So, you know, when you mix colors, don't just mix everything back in. Use that as kind of a base, like I'm doing with this gray. I've kind of focused in on my palette down here. Besides the gray that I mixed earlier, another color that I will mix, and sometimes I'll be able to use it for a couple of paintings, depending on how much I mix and how much I need. Part of the problem with most white, unless you get something like a cream or an eggshell or something, is that they tend to look cold and chalky when you use them. So one of the things you can do is add a little touch of warmth to it. Now this is, okay, this, I picked up a little bit of my cadmium orange, and that is probably all I am going to need for that pile of paint. What I'm trying to do is just tint it. And orange is a very, very powerful color. And I add a little more water to that so it mixes a little easier. So having this, you know, as I go into my clouds, you know, this is going to be for the white of the clouds. And make the clouds look a little bit warmer. So let me show you by comparison the difference between my white and let's see, it's hard to see. Let me turn this down. It's a little better. No, there's not enough that I can show you on camera. When I edit it, maybe I'll see if I can do a little bit better job. But it's just slightly tinted. So that when I use it up in the clouds or anytime I'm highlighting something, my white has a little bit of warmth to it, which is what a highlight is, you know, the sun hitting off of something. Now I'm going to stick with my number 4 flat bristle brush here, and this is going to be dry brush. So I'm going to pick up some of that color, and I have this is just I've got kind of a grayscale on the side here, but I can use it as a dabble board, and also to kind of work the color into my brush so that I don't have it all on the surface, because I want it to be dry. That's a little much, so I'm going to take my paper towel and just kind of wipe the outside edges, and that should do it. Now I've got my reference photo up here, and I'm just going to come right along the edges of the clouds where I see it, and lightly kind of scumble, pull back. This isn't to outline, this is just to create some lighter colors in there. Like I said before, with clouds you get sun coming in at all different places. So any place where I can use my values, I have dark here, so I can put some light in here. I'll come in and soften things with my fingers. I'm very lightly doing this. I'm not doing a real hard and trying to keep it like in little circles like before. Give it that wispy look. And then, you know, you can lighten the pressure of your brush until it just kind of goes away. Practicing that is beneficial to you. You know, it's not all one thing. It's a series of things that you do. You know, whether it's the brush or the pressure that you put on, or the technique you're using. Those are your that's your tools. Those are your arsenal. A lot of these clouds are not real bright. I'm just kind of like, just lightly skimming, letting the canvas take what it wants. When I reload, I'm in the very thin part of the paint where there's not a lot of paint, so I'm not picking up a big glob, and then I will come back and just kind of wipe out a little bit of it so that it's not real, I don't have a lot of paint on there. I can almost also take that gray that I mixed, add a little more white to it, so that I have like a light gray that I can use, because a lot of these clouds are not real white. And I'm using the side of my brush mostly, and just kind of coming in and lightly kind of scrubbing this in. Always a lot of these little high clouds after a storm. I can always tell when I get too much paint on my brush because it comes off a lot more solid than I would like it. I'm going to take some of that gray, mix it with a little bit of the white color, but I'm also going to add just a tiny touch of blue into it. I want to kind of cool it down. But I want, because some of these clouds off in the distance, too much. Maybe a little bit more blue. Maybe even a touch of alizarin crimson, kind of make it a little bit more on the lavender side. You get to make some decisions as an artist. Anytime I can stick purple in someplace, I do it. And in these distant clouds, there's a lot of lavenders and pale blues. If I get too much, I just wipe my brush out and then spread out what got put on there. And I go back in and mix some of these colors together. I just kind of wanted a lighter lavender for these really distant clouds. Now the reason I'm doing this, I want to get these clouds kind of finished so that I can start working on things that are going to be in front of them. Alrighty, let's see what else. And always, take your time, but occasionally stand back and look at what you have. That's what I'm doing right now, is I'm standing back and I'm looking at my clouds and seeing what else I can do. I'm trying not to cover up all of that dark, because that needs to be there, but I'm kind of softening some of that color because it may be a little bit too dark. This is still that lavender color that I made. And remember that part of this process is that acrylics do dry a little bit darker. And so you have to kind of remember that when you're painting, and it's hard because it looks good, and then you come back and you go, whoa, it really darkened up. So it'll darken just a little bit. And speaking of darkening, into my light gray, I'm going to add just a little bit of blue and a little tiny touch of burnt sienna. Make a cool gray for just some of the bottoms of these clouds. Again, this is, let's see, that's not too bad. Now, there are some darker things that show up against the light, and that's also another thing that I'm considering. I'm putting some of those darker clouds that kind of look like they should be in the sunshine, but they're really dark. Come along the bottom. And the bottoms of clouds are kind of flat. Depends on where the dew point is, and when the water starts to condense out. Look at this. Soften some of this color that I just put on. I like to work wet into wet. Which is, this is still wet. Although I need to add a little bit of moisture. Stand back and look at that. Okay, that's not too bad. Okay, I feel like I'm probably fiddling, so I need to stop. Okay, so what I'm doing is I've mixed a little bit of the white into that lavender color. I can add a little more blue, a little more alizarin crimson. But the key here is to get this really, really soupy. So I'm kind of scooping water up and putting it in. Now, if it's really too thin, you can always come back and put another layer of this on. And I would rather it be too thin than too thick, because it's... I didn't... At this point in time, I don't want to cover up what I'm doing. I just want to kind of mute the color a little bit. Push things back. Okay, so okay, let me switch back up here. Sky. So I've got a pretty full... Let me get my little thing here. This is pretty full, so it's... But you can see on there that you barely see that. And that's kind of what I'm looking for. But I don't want a lot in there, so I'm going to dry out some of it. I'll be using the side of my brush, and I'm going to be making some little circular motions. And I'm going to start at the horizon, because that's where most of the haze is going to be, is down here at the horizon. And it's kind of scary at first when you do this. And I'm making little circles. And I'm going to go over all of this. When it dries, it will look totally different from when it's wet. But it will push things back. It'll soften these clouds. I was thinking that my clouds were a little bit hard. So I'm picking up some more paint, and then just kind of lightly drying it off. Now I do this a lot, especially when I'm trying to get some distance into a painting. Like if I'm doing like a desert landscape, I may use more of a sand color, you know, soft burnt sienna or ochre color to create that atmosphere in the background. You know, up here I'm just kind of lightening my pressure. I'm not pressing quite as hard, and I'm just going to let it fade off. But this is just a good way to add some atmosphere. Let's do another layer here. And this is my number 12 flat bristle brush. Go over the horizon line here. I'm going to be working in the water, so that's not going to bother me. Just come up and just soften that edge. Soften these colors. Soften any of the darks that I think may be a little bit too dark in my clouds. Okay, now it doesn't look like much, but it does do quite a bit visually. Sometimes these subtle changes, are all you need is something subtle. You don't need to hit everything with a hammer. Let me stand back. This will dry pretty quick because it's dry brush and very thin, so it will dry. Now, down here in the water, I'm just going to start putting in a little bit of color back in the back. And that's probably where I'll stop, is right behind these rocks. So I'm going to get my this ultramarine blue and a little bit of Hooker's green. And a little touch of that gray that I mixed up before. Switching back to my number 4 flat bristle brush. I'm just wiping out some of that color, and my strokes are now going to be pretty horizontal, and I'm going to make little short strokes. Very lightly across the horizon. I can leave some of that other color in there. That becomes, highlights on the distant water. Just adding a little touch of water. If you feel that your brush is kind of dragging, that means it needs just a little bit more water. And I will check my horizon line later. I think that's pretty flat. Now this is kind of the shadows in the water, and I'll come back in later and do highlights. You want to bring your painting up all at the same time so that you're not finishing one part and then leaving the rest, because it throws you off and you start fixating on that one part. Okay, I just put a little bit more blue and green into here. I'm still making kind of short, choppy strokes, but they're horizontal. Adding just a little more green as I come around that corner. Now when I come into where those rocks are, I'm just gonna kind of keep my strokes nice and flat. Okay, I think I'm going to stop there for today. I'll let you guys get caught up